Hello and welcome to Unworthy History. On today's episode, I'm going to bring you some actual history from this book right here, Indian Depredations in Texas by J.W. Wilbarger, published all the way back in 1889. Now, the story we're going to read about today takes place in 1837, and it's called the Stone House Fight. On the 8th of October, 1837, 63 Texans left Fort Colorado, which was situated on Walnut Creek, 6 miles from where the city of Austin now stands. This gallant little band was under the command of Captain William Eastland. They proceeded up the Colorado River to the head of Pecan Bayou, where, from some dissatisfaction, the men separated, and 18 hardy young men under the command of Lieutenant Van Thuysen went off in a northerly direction towards a large Indian camp on the Walnut Creek, about 40 miles from a notable place called the Stone Houses. This was 3 stone mounds which at a distance resembled houses, hence the name. It was near this place where the last of these mounds was situated that this gallant little band was attacked by 150 Indians consisting of Wacos, Caddos, and Keechis. The little party of Texans took their position in a deep ravine. The Indians took their position about 70 yards in front of the ravine. The Texans sent out a Mr. Nicholson, who understood the Indian language, to treat with them. In order to make them hear him, he climbed up a large tree and opened the conversation with them. They obstinately refused to talk, but opened a fire on the Texans from their horses, from which they had not dismounted. Finding they could effect nothing in that way, the chief commenced riding rapidly up and down the ravine for the purpose of drawing the shots of the Texans at himself, holding his shield between him and the men. One of the men in the party, an old Indian fighter, knowing how to shoot at him despite his shield, took good aim at him and fired, killing him. The rest of the Indians crowded around the body of their dead chief, and as they did so, the Texans poured a volley in their midst, which made it pretty hot for them. They threw a rope around the body of the chief and galloped off out of reach of the shots. After depositing the dead body in a neighboring ravine, they returned on foot and took a position within about 60 or 70 yards of the ravine. Here there occurred one of the most terrific fights that ever took place in Texas. For 1 hour and a half, these Indians kept up an incessant fire at the whites. The Indians had an advantageous position in a clump of timber thickly settled with underbrush and tall grass. The Texans had to shoot at them in that secluded place as best as they could. They would raise their heads above the ravine, spy out the position of an Indian, then drop back and slip their gun over the bank and fire. Every time one of them shot, the Indians would throw a volley at him. After fighting for an hour and a half and having 50 of their number killed, the Indians found that they could not oust the whites in this way, so they resorted to one of their pieces of strategy, and that was to set the prairie on fire and burn them out. We omitted to state that there were about 50 Delaware Indians with the others at first, but when the fight began, they left and passed around on the opposite side of the Texans, and there took a position out of shotgun distance and watched the fight. These Delawares always claimed to be friendly with the whites. The Indians set the prairie on fire within a few rods of the ravine, and it threw such a cloud of smoke and heat among the men that they could neither see the enemy nor breathe freely. What were they to do? To remain in the ravine was certain death. They thought the Delawares opposite them were a portion of the enemy, and supposed they were placed there on purpose to cut off their retreat. So believing, they thought retreat in that direction impossible. Had they not been there, the Texans could have mounted their horses and made their escape. The Indians had now gone down the ravine to cut off their retreat, and what chance of an escape was there there? The only alternative, and that was a slim one, was to charge right through the Indian lines down the ravine. After a hurried consultation, they settled on this plan. Joseph Cooper, Alexander Bostick, William P. Wills, and a Dr. Sanders having been killed, there were but 14 men left to make the desperate venture. As soon as they advanced, the Indians fired, and the men, thinking there was no chance of an escape through their lines, turned out of the ravine up the line, thereby completely exposing themselves to the fire of the Indians. As they ascended the hill, 6 more of them were killed. One individual, Captain Rice, determined that he would carry out the plan that had been agreed upon, and dashed on by himself into a briar thicket. Just as he was entering it, to his surprise, he met a tremendous Indian with his gun raised to shoot him. He made a long leap in order to stop his accelerated motion, and at the same instant threw his gun over and shot the Indian through the body, killing him instantly. He then dashed on through the thicket and made his way out into the post oak with an empty gun. He here halted behind a tree to reload. He supposed that he and all the rest would be killed. He soon saw a man leaping towards him. He supposed it was an Indian and raised his gun to shoot him, but found out that it was one of his own party. Soon after, 6 more men came from the same direction and joined them. Here were 8 survivors out of 18, and 3 of them were wounded. They were more than 200 miles from the white settlements in an Indian country, completely stripped of everything except their arms. They had lost their horses, provisions, clothing, and blankets. They had nothing to eat and no blankets to lie on. Fletcher, Clish, and John Zeke were the names of the wounded ones. The wounds of these men were bound up as well as they could fix them and were greased with buffalo tallow. Neither the well nor the wounded had anything to eat for 4 days. Late in the evening of the 4th day, they killed 4 buffaloes, which saved them from utter starvation. On the 10th day, they arrived at a Kickapoo camp where the city of Dallas now stands. From there, they traveled on for 7 days to Samuel Henge's in the Cherokee Nation. From thence to Lacey's Crossroads on the old San Antonio Road, where they came to the first white settlements. Captain Rice, Lieutenant Van Thuysen, and Felix McCluskey made their way to the city of Houston. There was one man in the company who professed an entire disbelief in the existence of a god. His name was Bostic. He and Captain Rice had several arguments on the subject. One day Rice said to him, "You believe that you are no more than a log or a tree. I may yet see you die on this trip." After the fight began, Rice discovered there was something the matter with Bostic. He approached and asked him what was the matter. He replied that he was badly wounded. In a moment more he sank down on one knee, still holding to his gun, and exclaimed in the most piteous accents, "Lord, must I die?" He then began praying in earnest and expired in a few moments. The heroism, bravery, and endurance of this little band speaks for itself. Although defeated, they killed about 60 of the enemy, 10 times almost the number they lost, and the few remaining ones made their escape in the presence of the whole array of Indians, who had been so badly handled that they would not follow them into the woods. So that's the end of this story. Again, this is called the Stone House Fight because it took place near some Indian mounds that were called the Stone Houses. So if you've watched this channel a lot, you know that we've done a lot of stories from this book, Indian Depredations in Texas, that focus on Comanche attacks. But in this case, this was a group of Wacos, Caddos, and Keechis that fought this battle against some surveyors back in 1837. So if you want to hear more episodes like this, then be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Unworthy History.